I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, season 32, episode 23. And my name is Kimmy.
My name is Riley.
And in today's episode, Mad King Christopher wants our judgment on his unorthodox spell use. Gurgmurg adds to our city campaign discussion from a few episodes ago, and Steffi from Scotland is back from her banishment and writes in with a horror story.
Scottish horror stories are always good. So
the best.
horror of Fang Rock, Doctor Who.
Ooh.
I think it's Scotland. Anyway,
Yeah, probably. It sounds,
Should be.
Yeah. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. Announcements. We are still preparing for Game Days on November 4th. If this is the first time listening to the show, Game Days is our free community gaming day on Discord. I think there's 5 or 6 games posted currently. They're all different things. There's an Alice is Missing. There's Eat the Reich, I think, is another one that's being run. It's like a bunch of great games. Totally free. If you're on the Discord, that's happyjacks.org/Discord and part of the community. You can just join. If you aren't part of the community, you can join and just play for fun. It's a cool thing. So again, that's November 4th. And the end of season 32 is coming soon, friends. Very soon. So we do 25 episode seasons now. It stays the same. So this is episode 23. So we've got 2 more episodes in this season. And then remember, we take a 2-week break between seasons now. So the final episode of the season will be recorded on November 12th. And then we will be back on December 3rd for our first live recording of the new season, season 33. It's very exciting. Okay. Indie Designer of the Month last week for our friend Monroe Wells Soto. And they have the best itch.io ever, monroero.itch.io. And we love it. We stan it. And you can find them at Eldritch Crow on Twitter. And this week, because we've been saving this game, because it's their super creepy one for Spoopy Halloween, is Hear Her Weep. Hear Her Weep is a fast-paced card game inspired by La Llorona. And you get a group of friends together and see if you can survive or get drowned by her and her weeping. If you don't know, a little bit of a trigger warning. This is based on folklore, and most folklore around La Llorona deals with child death and infanticide. So she's a woman who suffers a great loss. Usually she, when her lover leaves her, she drowns their children and becomes like a vengeful spirit who haunts bodies of water and tries to lure unwary travelers and people to their death who are like, oh, there's someone crying, let's go see. And then
Yep.
So yes,
It's a bad day for you.
super bad. So there's a super creepy, awesome for Halloween if that's you're okay for you. It's usually $3, but it's on sale right now for $1.50. So there you go. Go get Hear Her Weep at monroero.itch.io. And thank you, Monroe Wells Soto, for being our Indie Designer of the Month for October. Can't wait till next week when we see the next person. It'll be very exciting.
All right. Let me get into this email.
Email number 1.
Hello, Happy Jackers. I hope this email finds you well. I have a problem that you may or may not be able to help me with, but I do have a follow-up question that you may be more able to shed some light on. The first issue is a question of rules adjudication/GM ruling. Therefore, I do not expect you to decide how it should be done, but I do ask for your insights on how it might be done. First, some background. Through a series of unfortunate events and bad decisions, my Dragonborn rogue was momentarily lost in the astral. Fortunately, Hugin and Munin, Odin's crows, showed up seeking news of the realms for their master. Being befuddled and having no clue how to get home, my character decides to share his most recent misadventure. After a pause and shared glances, the crows shrugged, thanked me for my... First of all, I love the idea of shrugging crows.
Yeah.
Thanked me for sharing my story, and then plucked the whole experience out of his head and left. Ooh. Oh, that's also a good DM move. Like, I don't want to hear this whole story. Yeah, they drank it. It's fine. I told it. I don't need to hear it again. They also dropped him off with his cohort who was fishing around the astral looking for him. So, thanks, I guess? Now, my PC only remembers being in the canoe just before the adventure began, and now he's being dragged out of some outrageous nightmare with no idea what's going on. And that was the end of the last session. I've had time to consider, and I've decided that my character, having lost memories, would also lose the rogue level he gained on the adventure, and gain a level in Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, as seen here. Well, as expected, my GM, being a good sport, approved the modification, but I want to do more. Specifically, I want to reskin the light spell. The spell description says the light can be colored as the caster likes. This is normally overlooked, but I started thinking on how I could funk this up. What color would be weird? How about black? Black, a pigment, as opposed to the lack of light blackness. What would that look like? I'm guessing like a black light. That would be what I would think. Or, the Darksaber. Aware this could be too creative, I approached my GM with this idea so as not to spring it on him mid-game and offered the following. Imagine this. You're in a sewer, in total darkness, not a speck of light to be seen. You hear the trickle of water flowing through the sewer and the musty odor of mold that must be clinging to the sewer wall. Then you hear it, a squeak, and the scratch of claws on stone. Is it one rat, 12 rats, or one giant rat? You need to know. You cast the new spell you've discovered, Unlight. Out from your clutch weapon flows darkness, only not? Unlike the impenetrable darkness that was there before, the not darkness reveals the shape of the world around you. The round, red brick grime, slime-covered walls, the ankle-deep, grimy water passing beneath you, and the lowly, ordinary gray rat making its way towards you. All of it in black. What delineates one black from another? How can you see the red stone, green slime, or gray rat? They're all cast in a black light, and yet you can tell somehow. This is where my GM got confused. He had questions. GM, what advantage does this confer? Me, none, other than looking funky. It mechanically functions as a normal light spell. If viewed from afar, you would stand out as an odd patch of darkness, revealing the PC standing in it. Is it supposed to be some kind of magic darkness? The GM asks. No. Me, it's a light spell. I've simply chosen the color to be black. We should have read this as a script.
We should have. Here, we can do that.
Yeah,
let's do it. Let's go back. Okay.
So let's start from the beginning of this part.
Okay.
So I will be the GM, and you can be me.
Okay.
Okay. What advantage does this confer?
None. Other than looking funky. It mechanically functions as a normal light spell, and if viewed from afar, it would stand out as an odd patch of darkness, revealing the PC standing in it.
Is it supposed to be some kind of magic darkness?
No, it's a light spell. I've simply chosen the color to be black.
Is it supposed to suppress normal light?
No, it shouldn't affect normal light. It only provides perception in normal darkness. It would likely be suppressed by a more powerful darkness spell.
But light is what we see. How can you see darkness? That's not how light works.
It's magic. It doesn't have to make sense. None of the game is real, and if you think about it, much of it doesn't make sense. I'm just offering a different way to describe it in-game.
In the end, I as the GM was very uncertain if it could be properly implemented in the game. Now I'm back out of character reading the email again. And scene. Well, what do you guys think of my ludicrous idea? As I said, I don't expect y'all to throw out a right answer as if that falls in my GM's department. I do, however, want your insight. Have you guys had a player come up with something so off the wall you have difficulty incorporating it into the game? I mean, I'm trying to work with my GM, and I've even said that if we couldn't come to some sort of agreement, I'd just stick to the basic rules as intended. Sincerely, the Duke of Delirium, the Lord of Lunacy, the Count of Chaos, the Mad King Christopher I. All right, I gotta say, I don't think this is as controversial as this GM is making it out to be.
Yeah.
This sounds like flavor text 100% to me. This doesn't sound like an actual change to the mechanics of the spell. I think that being able to control the flavor of your spells, unless you're playing a very strict like setting where magic functions in one very certain way that's defined by like the people who created it or something like that, I 100% think that it's completely acceptable to let players describe the flavor of the spell. In this case, I feel like maybe there's a miscommunication happening where the GM thinks you're trying to offer up a different mechanic, and you're just trying to describe how it looks. Like, you're like, no, this, mechanically, this is the light spell. It gives me the ability to see in darkness, that's what it is, but the light is a black light. And I get why the GM is like, oh, that's not how light works, but like, it doesn't sound like you're trying to imply that this would cause like issues with like giving someone disadvantage because it's dark or whatever. It's like, if the light spell would work here, this spell would work here. If light spell wouldn't work here, this spell won't work here. And it's just the description is somewhere you're getting lost in the weeds of describing it to where I think what you're trying to do and what your GM thinks you're trying to do is not connecting. That's what this felt like to me.
Yeah, it's funny because on the like cold read of this conversation, like the GM part just seems like sort of baffled to me.
Yeah.
So I was like, is it supposed to do this? No, it's just normal light spell. Okay, like they're definitely like, I think not getting that it's like no, it's just like the sugar on top of the waffle.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I'm not changing it. It's still a waffle. Like, it just looks a little different.
Yeah. I would say to your GM, like, think about, I already said it once, think about the Darksaber. Like, think about it as a thing like that. The Darksaber is a lightsaber that is made of black light. Like, it's like, okay, but it still works. My hat fell off. I think this is definitely just maybe a communication issue more than as a functional issue. But to answer the other question about, have you had people? I love this kind of stuff. When I role play as mages and as clerics, I love to think about what my character. I think it's a great way to bring your character's personality and role play into things that could normally be bogged down with mechanics and roles and stats and stuff like that. To me, it's such a great way of describing how your character weaves magic, how they see the world. I think if your character is a cleric, for example, I think figuring out how their spiritual weapon reflects their relationship with their god or their type of, like, my favorite character, one of my favorite characters of all time is my unbridled cleric, and her spiritual weapon was like a black tentacle appearing out of like the void, and that was always such a cool, creepy vibe to me. That was like always fun about it. And one of my favorite examples of all time when I was playing the game was I had a player I was also playing, but this guest player was playing a Triton. And when she cast Fireball, the way Fireball manifested for her was like a vent of hot magma that would come out of the ocean floor. And the reason for that was because her character had always lived in the ocean. She would never have seen fire. So for her, what is like a very hot thing that would do fire damage? It's hot magma spilling out of a vent on the ocean floor. And she basically was like, oh, I created this character based around this visual image, because she was playing it for one game only. So it's like, I just had this idea of this burning like magma. But as far as the characters that it attacks are concerned, it does the same level of burning damage that a fireball spell would do. It just looks different. And I will say, as someone, I write for D&D Beyond. I am not an employee of Wizards. I cannot speak on behalf of Wizards. I cannot speak on behalf of Hasbro. However, I will say that in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, this is 100% written up as a thing you can and should be willing to do in your games. So,
yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things, like the very, like, I mean, not the first, but like the main D&D game that we played ages ago that really started all this Happy Jack stuff and got me into tabletop was a 4E game, and it was like 4E was like brand new.
Yeah.
And so I made a Servant of the Raven Queen, and they hadn't really they hadn't released anything about her yet.
Yeah.
It was like the Queen of Death. It's really cool. Okay, so I like wrote all this lore, and like they had the spells and stuff, but like there were no descriptions, and it was like so much fun. I had so much fun like describing what everything looked like and who the Raven Queen was for me, and like this like and I mean, it ended up being so different than what they released, and I hated what they released.
Yeah.
Just because it was different. Like I probably would have liked it, but like for me, she was like this balance, like of life and death, and she wasn't like evil. Yeah. Because it was like it's the circle of life. Like, you know, the death is part of that, and all these things. But
it's kind of how she works in the Exandria setting that Mercer made up.
Yeah. But it's just great to have that freedom, and you can just go wild with it. And I think that's the most fun part. like I think that's one of the great things about playing tabletop versus like doing video games and stuff, because video games, the spell looks the same for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, no matter what you want it to look like, that's what it looks like. And like tabletop, you can make it whatever you want it to be. You know, make it magma balls, make it,
Yeah.
you know, like blue fire or whatever.
So cool.
Yeah, there's so many amazing things, because it doesn't really matter what you describe it as long if you're using the same mechanics. Like, who cares?
Yeah. It's the fun of it. It's all theater of the mind. So
Yeah.
even in this case, like if your GM doesn't quote unquote approve it, like there's nothing to stop you from in your head imagining this is how it looks. Like that's like the thing. Like you don't, like most of the time you're just gonna say I cast light and then everyone can see. Like that can be, and then your mind you're like, but it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Like yeah. Speaking of the Raven Queen, before we move on to the next thing.
Okay. Well,
They had a Unearthed Arcana for Raven Queen that never got published. It was a Warlock patron you could have with her, and like part of what you got was like basically a familiar that was like a raven that would do stuff for you, and it was so cool. And I was so sad they didn't use it. But I did play a on that note of what you were saying. I played a Death Cleric, which is like a really good domain, but I played the cleric like a Valkyrie and like
so good.
I made her very gregarious and like and her whole thing was like death is your friend. It comes to you when it's your time.
Yeah.
Should not be feared, should be embraced. And so she was this very gregarious, fun spirit, like high spirits character. Because I was like, it's so easy to make a cleric of death and make them like
emo,
groggy, emo, and sad, or like suspicious, like a worm tongue type.
Yeah.
But instead, I made this character who was like very like Norse and like very like about like honor and also like befriending death and not being afraid of death and like the balance of life and death. Exactly.
Yeah,
So.
like that's kind of what my character was. Not like she was a priestess, I think of it, but she was very much like a kind of like a death doula almost. Like for those of you who aren't afraid, like doulas like help you with different things. They have doulas who come, like if you're having birth, there's people who come and help you prepare to die. You can have these people who are kind of experts in it come in and assist you. So that's kind of what she was, like the same thing, like death is part of life. Like this is how it's supposed to be. Like it was interesting because like she wasn't the only healer in the group. She wasn't the main healer even, but like she had to heal sometimes. But it's like, I don't know, is it your time?
Can I tell you that as a frequent clerics are my two favorite classes in D&D are bards and clerics, and clerics really took over for me as my favorite classes. But I also almost never play clerics that are healers.
Yeah.
And it gets frustrating because I think people hear cleric and assume like, okay, we got our healer taken care of. And there's even like a meme about it. It was like a TikTok video where the voice is like, who said I'm a healer? I don't have any healing spells. And it's like, because like my favorite cleric subclass in 5th edition is the Tempest Cleric. And Tempest Clerics are basically Thor.
Yeah.
Like they have like their weapon attacks at a certain level get like lightning damage added to your strikes. And like they have special things where your channel divinity does max damage on lightning and thunder damage. So if you do call lightning and you hit someone with it, and also this also works in Baldur's Gate 3, you can make a Tempest Cleric as one of your things, and you can just mess up monsters with just like a call lightning spell that does max damage.
Nice.
It's very fun. And so I'm like, no, I'm playing this martial weapon wielding spellcaster, and it's like, you want me to spend my best way of healing is blowing up all the bad guys. We played a game one time where I got dimension doored onto an enemy pirate ship, and then my co-player described it as dropping off the nuke and jettisoning out of there, because he dropped me off, left, and then I used destructive wave and just got rid of everybody on the ship.
Gosh, amazing.
Great. Anyway,
That's so cool.
yeah. Back to the email. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think,
Nerd out.
I think, before you go back to your GM, I think I would like consider a little bit exactly how you want it to be a little bit more. Like I love it.
Yeah.
Like the Darksaber is a great idea.
Yeah.
Like maybe instead, like it's supposed to light up places, but instead maybe it works like night vision, like camera.
Yeah.
Like everyone, when you cast it, sees like that. So it's like darkness, but they can still see. So it's still doing all the same things mechanically of the spell. It just has like a different flavor, and just be prepared with that description, because I think that will be very helpful to your GM, because I think your GM is like most of us when we're GMs and people ask for weird things, are like, wait, what haven't I thought of? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to circumvent these rules? They're
Yeah.
just a little suspicious, and rightly so, because
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
I mean, players deserve a little bit of suspicion, especially in like games that have like kind of wiggle things like this, where it's like, oh no, it says and here, not or, and you're like, shit. Okay.
Yeah, make it very clear that you're not trying to change the mechanics of
Yeah.
the spell. You're just trying to describe how it looks or how it operates, how it visually appears.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
So I think this is a very cool idea. I think it sounds like your GM, like it sounds like they're open to it, and they're just not quite like wrapping their head around it.
Yeah.
And they'll probably be very supportive if you like just go back to the little bit like a clear description and a clear idea of it.
Yeah, I think your example was great, the night vision thing. I think Darksaber. I think we were joking about it, blacklight, but the thing about a blacklight is like the light bulb doesn't brighten the room up, but things glow, and so you can still see okay. I also think about what's the thing in Shadow and Bone that's like the darkness that crosses the land. Like I feel like when you're inside that thing, there's a really cool, interesting like way that it looks, and it's like that gets more into magical darkness. But I think again, if you're just talking about how things look versus, or it could even be, oh, when the black light is on, what if everything's in grayscale, or what if everything is a negative, like a photo negative?
Yeah.
Like that could be.
Oh yeah, like with like Frodo and the ring in the movie.
Yes. That's a great example.
Like it gets like like all weird, but like you can still see at least, and you're like, ooh, that's cool.
That's a perfect way.
super
That's a
creepy.
really good. Yeah, those kind of things are really fun.
Yeah. I love that. That's very cool. And there's so much flavor there. And again, like your GM doesn't have to worry about you like stretching or bending the rules at all. It's just like super flavorful. And maybe some of the other characters in the party like hate it.
Yeah.
Because it's not like regular light turning on. It's like, oh man, this is super creepy. I don't like it.
It's unnatural.
Yeah.
We were talking about Hades Town before we recorded it.
Yeah.
This ain't right and it ain't natural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So good. So
Yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had. And again, like light is a cantrip, so definitely don't like be like, oh, because I'm using this cantrip, now I have darkness. Yes, I understand why your GM is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that would be my one like hesitancy if I was DMing this. It's like, okay, black light, like a black light, like when you shine things, because then like you're like, well, like we've all seen so many crime shows. It's like, okay, now I'm using my black light to see, is there blood here?
Yeah,
and you're like, that's not what this spell's supposed to do. Yeah. So like find a way to describe it. I love the idea of like the ring and Frodo, like creepy, weird, blowy, like kind of windy but not windy.
It's unsettling.
Yeah. Kind of ghost looking. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So you'll come up with something awesome, Chris, and I think your GM will probably go with it. Just make sure you're like super clear and like, hey, this is my intent. It will not be. I'm not gonna abuse it.
Yeah.
So awesome. Write us back and tell us how that goes.
Yes.
I would love another script too. Like if you can recreate that conversation like you have with your GM.
Just make sure you write all the times your GM complimented you for how creative and clever you were. I'm sure we want to be able to act that out.
Yeah, especially if you used our ideas.
Yeah.
All right, mailbag number 2. Ahoy, Captain Kimmy and the Happy Jacks crew. I just listened to season 32, episode 20, in which someone wrote in asking for advice about a city campaign. I have some related experience, plus 2 additional questions. My group has been playing a neighborhood-focused cyberpunk game on and off for a bit, and here's some things that worked for us. 1, it's been rewarding when PCs change the status quo in their faction, neighborhood, whole city, or whatever their scope of influence is. Our neighborhood is undeniably different because of the PC's efforts. The PC started the game with some level of reputation. It's helped me, as a GM, roleplay NPCs well and helped get us immersed quickly. I'll just go through the list and then we can go back one by one and see how great they are.
Yeah.
Number 3, we fleshed out some of the NPCs and important locations in session 0. It wasn't released when we started, but maybe we could have used an award-winning game aid to help. All right, yeah, that's Decima. Hashtag. Okay.
What is Decima? That's the R&D for your tabletop
R&D for
game?
your RPG. You can find it at goldenlessagames.com. Okay. You know how, despite the GM's best laid plans, the PCs always turn left? In my experience, there are way more ways to turn left in a city than in a roaming adventure campaign.
Yeah, there's lots of alleyways and places to go down. Like
it's like a grid.
Out in the wild, you're just doing a circle if you turn left a bunch. But in the city,
all left turns. Some advice that Stu often gave helped us. Know what the major NPCs, factions, etc. want, and respond accordingly when the PCs barge in and fuck it up. 5.
In an RPG game? I don't think that.
What?
I never had this happen in a
PC?
game.
Is it messing us with the plan? Whatever. All right. Number 5. Have a sense of why the city came to be here. A couple key industries, seat of political, military, religious, and/or magical power, trade hub, all of the above. Knowing a couple of these things help clarify the stakeholders and the stakes when you need to improvise. And 6. Competing and especially conflicting agendas between stakeholders that can seed plot hooks. For example, in our game, there are several competing visions for what the neighborhood should become. Real estate developers, rival gangs, law enforcement, and ordinary folks all have different agendas, and members within those groups do too. All right, so let's go through that, and then we'll go on to the questions in just a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's all super great advice.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree about the knowing why the city was there.
Yeah.
Because so often that becomes like the skeleton and like the foundation of the town. Like if it's on the water in a bay, like it's gonna be a port town or
Yeah.
a trade town
Or fisher.
yeah, something like that. Or maybe that's gone now, and that's like there's
and
a
industry's
big
going, and what are people doing to make a living now? Because
yeah. It's like this gaping hole in what used to be there.
or like a city where if you're doing a fantasy campaign, like a different race had built this city, like elves had built it and then they left, and now like dwarves have moved in, or like various factions have kind of joined together, and like the foundation, or like I already like to use a sci-fi example, how like DS9 is a Cardassian station, but it's being run by the Federation and like, Joint Bajoran staff. Like it's like a whole thing. Like, oh, we don't quite know how this stuff works, and so we're trying our best. That kind of stuff is so fun.
So interesting. Yeah, it's very cool. That was absolutely, these are all great ideas. They're all fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. I feel like we definitely missed that one. That's an important one that we definitely should have talked about in our conversation. But sometimes you don't think of it when you're talking like off the cuff.
And you don't think about it with cities, like how much cities change over generations. Like think about like it's kind of wild when you play, like when I played Assassin's Creed Ragnarok, is that what it's called? Valhalla,
yeah.
When you go into London and you're like, the whole time I'm like, oh man, London's gonna be so big and cool. And I get there, and then you get there, it's like, nope, it's like a one horse town. Millennium, and it's like there are bigger cities in the game than London, and you're like kind of surprised by it. And it's like, yeah, there was a point in time where that's like England was like a pretty undeveloped area, and
I one of the big article I wrote years ago on my blog that went viral, and now it doesn't even, I don't think it's even up anymore, was about wishing that I could get copies of Assassin's Creed games that were non-violent so that I could have students play them.
You can.
You can?
Not so much the game itself, but sorry, at least Odyssey. I don't know about other ones, but Odyssey has a history setting where you basically just tour the locations and talk to people, and you don't actually have like the game itself being played. I gotta make sure. I think that's right. But, like,
okay.
There's a setting where it's like a tourism basically.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That's
I don't know if your kids. I don't know if there's a way to stop it so your kids can't get into the more violent version of it.
Yeah.
But it's basically just like you're basically sailing around the Aegean and like meeting people, and
that's pretty much how I played it. Like I was like, look at me, this beautiful badass fucking woman, and I have a horse.
Yeah, look at the I played that game so many times. I lost my save and I was so sad.
I just ride around looking at myself. I'm like, this is my best life.
I ride around seducing women. What?
Yes. And ride around on my horse in armor, looking badass and fighting things. And
I believe there's I don't think there's any plot when you do it that way. I think it's literally just running around and like talking to people, but it's still very fun and cool.
That's cool. I had no idea because I actually wrote that article before on the previous one, the American Revolution.
Oh,
one,
yeah.
Which ended up not being good, but it was very interesting.
That one took me off the game for a while.
Yeah, it was very bad, but it was interesting, like because there was so much history really being involved, and having been to Boston and seeing how closely the layout really is, and like how accurate it was, and talking to Ben Franklin and stuff like that. You're like, wow, this is very interesting. But I can't then jump and murder people.
That's a series where so Assassin's Creed or Education Motives of Violence Free Tour. That's basically what is also an Odyssey. With Assassin's Creed, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, because we have a question to answer.
Yeah, I know.
But
way off.
My thing about this game series is that I'm almost always happier when it doesn't get into any of the stuff about like the like originators or whatever, and it's just I just
yeah.
want the characters in the era that the assassin stuff is happening, and I don't need the only one where I think it really works is Odyssey, and only because the way that they tie that stuff into Greek myths and the idea of like, oh, the gods were actually these like Atlantean like beings and whatever, that's great. But then when it gets back into, oh, we have to do this stuff in the modern day to prevent an apocalypse, like, no, thank you. I have no interest in it whatsoever.
Yeah. At least in Odyssey, you weren't some like douchey guy. Like that was like the one saving grace. It was like I still hated it, and I still hated keeping like I want to play like in this time period. That's why. But yeah, they just will not let go of it, and it's the thing that me and my partner like complain about every time we play one of the games.
Yeah. And then Valhalla did a similar thing of making it cool how the like Norse gods were also meant to be these, but like once again, it did a thing in that game that made me so mad that I don't want to play any more games in that series until they resolve a certain thing. I don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
But for the listeners,
a lot of people had that same reaction.
There was a point where something changes in the game and I don't want to play it anymore because I'm skeeved out by what's happening from this moment forward.
Yeah.
And I was just like, why would they make this choice? And like, why? Anyway, yeah. And I was just like, I was so happy being this cool badass Viking lady running around and pacifying the first of all, colonizing the UK is hilariously fun to do, and like it's like
as a Viking, yes.
I think about how like, okay, this is my last very off topic tangent. I think a lot about how England historically is that planet from Doctor Who that just kept getting invaded, and basically it feels like London just kept getting invaded, or England kept getting invaded and conquered so much that they finally were like, fine, we'll go conquer the world ourselves. And like, it's just such a funny thing. It's like everyone just kept sailing over and conquering the islands. And finally they go, well, this is what we do. Apparently we're all the survivors of all these constant conquering. So now we're just going to go conquer too.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of makes sense. But kind of like why I brought that game up is like the world building and the planning, even though a lot of it's based on history and those games is really great. So when you really like think about that, like why was London there?
Yeah.
And like how it starts there. And the same thing when you are starting to look at like how these civilizations built up, whatever period, it's like, oh, there's a river here.
Yeah.
Or there's this here. And there's always something that started it that should still flavor the city wherever it is now.
Yeah, if it's in a mountain, it was probably a mining city. If it's a mining city, then you're gonna have a stock that is like really into like stoneworking and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like LA, like specifically, like I teach California history for 4th grade, and I always love the part where we talk about Los Angeles and it's like talking about, okay, why is the movie industry here? Well, it was a place where people could get quickly and literally, like they don't have green screens back then, kids, and they're just like, what? They don't have graphics? I don't understand. Wait. And then you're like, yeah, so Los Angeles, you can drive to the mountains and have snow. You can drive to the desert and film a Western. You can drive to the beach and film, like pretend like you're in Hawaii. It's like, because all those biomes were nearby within like an hour's drive, that's one of the reasons LA popped up as like the movie capital of the world.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, it's like, yeah, like there's reasons things ended up everywhere, which is why a giant city for 30 million people's in the desert, but whatever.
Yeah. And then had to be irrigated and
Yeah.
And then Jack Nicholson had to like solve a conspiracy theory. It was a whole
it's a whole lot. But
his nose cut off.
Yeah, all those things. But so like really dig into that when you're creating your cities, whether you use, a Session 08 or a World Creation 8 or not. Those are great questions to ask. And they should absolutely lead into what NPCs are doing, what power brokers are doing, what different stakeholders in the city, want. Even if you're like, undead or cyberpunk or whatever.
And I wanted to go back to that first one of rewarding when the PCs change the status quo. I think like going back to more video game examples, like that's one of the fun things in some of the Grand Theft Auto games, like when your gangs take over areas of it. And the other games have that too. And in fact, Assassin's Creed has that. Like you can decide if the thing is now under Viking control or whatever. But also, I was gonna say, from a tabletop perspective, I think Blades in the Dark is a really good game to take inspiration from this, even if you're not going to play Blades in the Dark. I think the way that, like, when you get to downtime in between missions, in between jobs, like, the way you roll to see, like, oh, what is our rep? How much heat is on us? Like, how much influence do we have over this area of town now? I think those are kind of things where, even if you don't do them in a mechanical sense, I think as a GM running a city-based game, it's good to go, oh, what is the reputation? Think about what all your NPCs, like, how much do people now know about these characters? Are they becoming like the folk heroes of the town? Are they becoming like, if you were playing in Deadwood, like, how many people would people working on a mine out in somewhere, would they hear about Wild Bill Hickok coming to town and being shot to death in a card game? Like, would that be something, like, would that be someone who would that be famous enough for it to spread out to people working just like regular jobs in that town, or would things be more self-contained within like a specific sphere of influence? That kind of stuff is really interesting to me. So
Yeah. Another thing that you want to maybe think about is like urban legends. And I don't think we talked about that in the last episode, but I think maybe because we were talking about Hear Her Cries or Hear Her Weep or whatever it was called in the first part, I was like, I'm now like in the La Llorona like headspace, and I'm like, oh man, like that's super interesting. Like what buildings in the area are haunted? Like, is there a monster that people believe in town and stuff like that? And or like just superstitions, which are always super fun to come up with and make and base that on the history of the place you're at.
yeah, I played a game one time that was based in like a fantasy version of Salem, like during witch trials.
Yeah.
And we were all playing kind of monstrous characters, and I actually made my character like someone that people whispered about. Like, she was like, oh, don't go in the woods, or Patience Prim will her vengeful. Like, she was someone who had thought to have been killed by witch hunters, and then she was actually like a half vampire. She was a vampire. So it was like, yeah, don't go in the woods, or Patience Prim will find the wicked men and take them out into the darkness or whatever. And that was who she was. And to build on that urban legends thing and combine it with what I had just said about what people think about you in the town. Also remember that, like, especially if you're using a city where there's not like print or electronic media, and all story, not that facts spread easily even in a world with print and electronic media, but if you're in a world where all facts are spreading by word of mouth alone, think about the rumor mill. Think about the game of telephone, of like what the characters actually did to what like 6 layers of people and citizens removed from them are hearing about what happened.
Yeah.
And like, think about tall tales and legends that has spread, think about, William Wallace is 6 foot tall and he shoots fireballs out of his ass. Like that kind of thing is like, that can be really fun because you can really twist the events of the game by how the people in the city hear about them 4th or 5th or 6th hand.
Or maybe they're just learning from it from like the graffiti on the walls. Like I always love like Rome and like all those shows where it's like suddenly there's like Caesar with a giant fucking dick on the wall, and like all these like awful like all the like graffiti of them, like all the rumors that are about all the politicians and all that shit, and I just love that.
And that's a great example too, because Roman graffiti, if in real life, like they found a bunch of it in Pompeii and stuff like that, and a lot of it is identical to graffiti nowadays. Like there's a lot of Roman graffiti that's about who someone's banging and how great it was, and that kind of stuff. Like there's bathroom wall graffiti essentially in the city of Rome, and so think about when you have your players wandering through a city, think about what random things they're seeing on the walls of cities and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So back, you have questions still. All right, your questions were, now for my questions. When I think of a city-based story or campaign, I think of a story that is not merely set in a city, but somehow centers it centers on it and its neighborhoods, its factions, etc. But I'm having trouble thinking of a good reference media. Oh, well, good. We've just had a whole bunch of that.
Yeah, listen to the episode of Happy Jack's RPG that this was actually on.
Yeah, listen to all the things we just said before we read the end of your email.
Listen to season 32, episode 23.
Yes, it's super good.
Ooh, it's a palindrome.
Yeah. I think I can think of a few, including the original Happy Jack's Vampire AP, but not many. Do you all have any recommendations? Relatedly, the host recommended a city that should be like a character. Can the hosts of this episode think of an example or two of such city characterizations in the media? How does this work? Thank you, Gergmerg. P.S. Traditional P.S. P.P.S. I trim this, I promise. P.P.P.S. Who else is excited for November 4th game days? Woo!
I love that Gergmerg said that they trimmed this, which is funny because it's definitely the shortest email by far that I think I've had in a long time on the show.
You're so good at reading. I'm just like, okay, Riley's here. We can like pick the long one.
I'm having fun with this. I think last time I got burned because I came in, I was a last minute fill-in, and I was like just recovering from being sick, so I could not finish reading things. We talked about a few things that were real examples. City as a character. First of all, I think almost any, I hate to use police things as examples, but almost any cop show set in Boston, you're gonna have that. I think that unfortunately, a lot of those procedurals that are set in specific cities are really good examples of that. But I'm trying to think of non-cop things. I think of
Right.
fictional fantasy things too.
Yeah.
I think that I didn't love this show overall. I want to say this, but I think the Apple TV series Silo, which is based on some books, I think they did a really good job of setting up like how the silo operates and how the silo works as a you get an idea of what the culture is within that. And I think a lot of that you'll even get like in the first episode, so it's not I have a lot of issues with it, but if a lot of people like it, I don't want to yuck or yum if you loved it, but I do think that it's a good example of like how especially like a unique setting operates. Like I fully believe in Silo as a functioning society, and that's I think because you have like you've got these two political systems that kind like a judicial and a executive branch that kind of conflict with each other, and you have this sheriff's department that also kind of conflicts with both sides of this sometimes, and you also have like sections of the city that function differently, and you have it's a city that doesn't have elevators, so you have to go up and down stairs all the time, and so what effect does that have on the people who are at the lower levels who don't get visited as often by the leadership and stuff like that? So that's a good one. I would say also the Expanse series. I think you get a really good idea of what Belter society looks like versus what Earth society looks like versus even what Mars or individual ships look like. I think that Belters especially are the best example from that show of the city as a character.
Yeah.
I think King's Landing in Game of Thrones is a really good example of a city that, especially like the eras when Tyrion is the Hand of the King and he's doing a lot of stuff like dealing with the functioning day in and day out of the city, which is why Tyrion, I think, is, in my mind, the one who ultimately wins the Game of Thrones because he puts himself in that power seat again and knows what he's doing. But
they do a good job of that, too, like having the different vibes of the different houses.
Yes.
So, and even like the clothing and stuff is really different.
Yeah, when you go visit a different like kingdom part of the what is it, 10 kingdoms or whatever, the 7 kingdoms?
Yeah.
They're different climates, different environments. Like Winterfell is very different than King's Landing even, or Dorne. And that's a great example.
And it's part of their like you can look at someone and be like, oh, that's someone from the north or something like that because of the furs they wear, things like that. It's just they do a really great job. I mean, there's a lot. It ends up being a big disappointment, so don't get super invested. But especially those first seasons, looking at it, they do a great job of world building and the different groups and cultures from all those different places. I think also you already mentioned
that you're breaking news about the disappointing ending of Game of Thrones.
I don't know. It's not news, but like just warning. Like I don't want people to think I'm recommending it because it's a great thing. But...
I should also say, by the way, I just realized I've been talking about a lot of struck content, and I am on strike. I don't mean to endorse anything right now that's struck. I apologize. I just realized some of
I'm doing it because I'm not.
I think I'm allowed to, as long as I'm like just casually doing it and not like highlighting it. But like I think I probably should be more careful not to. But
okay.
But we are. There's a meeting happening right now, like maybe literally right now. But yes, I should point out that I am on strike.
Yeah.
I should probably be more careful with my references.
And so these are
Silo books only, and not the TV series. Only the books.
Yeah.
So, and only the Game of Thrones books.
Yeah,
yes. Well, actually, I think Game of Thrones might even be a BBC. That doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and also we're not saying necessarily that you should go watch these things.
Yeah.
We're using them as reference points for what you can do in your game.
Yeah.
So this is not.
I just want to make sure that nothing I said is an endorsement of any of these things, and I'm not promoting these things.
Yeah, exactly. So, but these are ideas of what you can do. I am not in SAG, so go education system. Yeah. My union doesn't care what I talk about as far as movies, but I think also one of my favorite examples of this, and partially because I've been writing a game that's sci-fi, but DS9 is a really great example of, it's not a city, it's a station, but like a community, and there's like the commerce section, and then there's like where the kids are, and like, so it's a really great kind of layer of different things too, that you can really get ideas from, like, okay, where they have like a Klingon restaurant, and then they have also this one, and then there's the bar everyone goes to, and then they get upgrades to like what they can do in the bar, and this is where like the administrative level is, and this is, I don't know, it's a very interesting thing. And especially with when they start getting into the religions and the history of all that things and the Bajorans, it gets very deep. And I think that's a great example of like world building that you can use and that you can like also kind of replicate with a game.
Yeah, I think for TTRPG examples of things as well, we talked a lot about D&D tonight, but I do think that D&D source books that are set in specific regions do a really good job of breaking down those regions. I think that especially the crossover D&D Magic the Gathering for Ravnica. Ravnica is a city spanning plane. It's a plane spanning city, so it's almost like Coruscant in that way.
Yeah.
And it does a really good job of breaking down these districts and these like what these guilds are controlling this district or whatever. So it gives you a good idea of how to like run a campaign that is set on a city world or a big massive city that's like, especially if you never want to leave the city.
Yeah.
And it's good for a cyberpunk game especially because like, oh, I'm never gonna leave this city setting. That's really good. I think that I just have it on top of my. I think like even like Faerun, I think that Waterdeep is very different than Neverwinter, which is very different than Baldur's Gate. So I think going like if you have D&D books already, I recommend picking up the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide because I think it does a really good job of like describing each individual city. And I think just looking at those, you'll get an example of like, okay, so it presents this city one way, it presents this one this way. This one's got this weird cult of 3 gods that people are afraid of. This one has this Lord's Alliance that's anonymous. This one has this like weird vein of magic that goes through it, and that's why it's warm, and they're like, no, come here. And then you go to the 10 towns, you're like, oh, this is like a cold, icy north. So there's like a lot of really good examples of different regions, how those areas built out cities within those regions, and then how those cities function. So that's a good example of that as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, and then like it's always going to be like close to my heart, but One Ring does a really good job of that, very specific for like certain areas. But the source books for Free League's One Ring are just super awesome and have so much like flavor and stuff. And so that adds well. I mean, if you're a Tolkien fan, Tolkien tells you about places like a lot, like pages of like what food they eat in these places. Like, it's a lot. It might not be your bag, but if it is, that's also a great like kind of like inspiration to be like, because he thinks about everything. Like he writes songs from the places and things like that and describes these places in detail, the entire history of all these places. So it's like, you don't have to go that deep.
Yeah.
But
Tolkien's a class of his own. And it's also like Tolkien especially is a good example because of what you're saying, because Tolkien he explicitly tries to present it as these were all real places and real events, and I have just found historical documents that I'm translating for people to understand what happened. And so like I think that's why he tries so hard to flesh it out as like this was a real world. This was a real era in Earth's history. And,
well, and that's the part that he enjoyed the most. Like he liked writing the books, but coming up with the languages of each place.
Such a nerd for that stuff.
So I mean, that was the part he loved the most. And I feel like the rest of it, he kind of like, well, I might as well keep doing this, because like there were actually like, if you read some of his documents, like reason he had like Elven language do this is because of this, because in the history, and then it switched when they there's like the history like supports his language creation, which is just wild and amazing.
Such a nerd.
Such a nerd. I love it so much. But anyway, so those are all really great things you can look at. I don't know. It's so much fun. This part I love the world building so much.
And not to keep doing video game examples, but one last one too. I think Skyrim does a great job of, because each even though it's all Nordic, they're all is that what they're called, Nords? Yeah, all the Nords. Even the different cities within the Nordic region are still different. Like you're gonna have the stoneworking city, but you also have like, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but you have like because I've been playing so much BG3 that I forget the cities in Skyrim now. Yeah. But like you have the city that's all run by the thieves guilds there, and like like the Blackbriars like are like there's like town like bribery happening. But what's so fun about those games is how at certain times of day in the I guess Skyrim's the name of the country. Riften. Riften is like full of like thieves. Markarth is all inside a mountain, and so people, and you have like when you walk into different towns. Like in Solitude, you know what like a mead hall looks like versus what it looks like in Winterhold, and you have those kind of things. But also like at 5 p.m. ish in the game, everyone puts their work down and they'll wander into the pub, and you'll be in the pub like, and someone whose shop you were in earlier now walks in and sits down and drinks, and like it's such a functioning little thriving little town of AI.
One of my favorite things about, I mean, I've played so much of this game, like wild. Like we have a picture of our wedding party as Skyrim. Like we all bought dresses and suits and stuff and like shredded them. And then we're all holding like weapons, and there's a big giant dragon, and behind us, like we just fought a dragon, and it's an epic thing. It was like Kotaku did a big thing about it, and just because we put it on the internet because we're fucking nerds and that's what we do. But
I would stand and object, but I took an arrow to the knee.
Yeah, what about there's so many jokes. And then my flower girl and ring bearer Stu's kids were there, and they're like poking the dead dragon with a stick. That's like the thing. It's like
That's a good one.
the best. The internet was like, are those kids
Did you
poking?
start sweet rolls?
Yeah. But yeah, one of my favorite things in Skyrim is that the music is so cool. Like the songs that the bards, the NPC bards sing, but depending on where you go, it's different lyrics to the same music. So it's like just like we have so many songs that go to, folk songs, so many different versions that have the same melody but are different. The same thing as you go through Skyrim, like there's different versions of the same song depending on which side of the politics you're on. And I just love like things like that in world building too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's so good.
Skyrim's really interesting too because based on what character you create affects the way you're treated when you go into certain. You may not want to include prejudice and bigotry in your game, but you still might have like for example in Skyrim, if you're playing as an orc, you don't have to talk your way into the orc strongholds, those kind of things. So there are those kind of vibes too, of depending on if you're building a city-based campaign, your player characters, the factions they belong to will impact how those factions treat them. And if you have guilds in your city, someone who's a member of one guild might not be as welcome in other guilds, or like maybe there's bad blood between these two guilds, and so like it's a Romeo and Juliet kind of vibe happening, those kind of things. So those are good examples too of like, oh, how does character choices and creation affect how these other things will approach you.
Yeah. And even NPCs and their reputations with that, because like in Skyrim, and I'm sorry, you brought up Skyrim. I can't believe I didn't think of Skyrim. It's so good. Yeah. But like Ulfric is like one of the big characters in the game, and depending on where you are, he's a criminal, a murderer, or he's a total hero and like freedom fighter. So so Ulfric is like, depending on what city you're in, is totally different vibes. Songs are different about him. So it's like, have that in your game too. Maybe the king is so beloved in certain parts of the city and not in others. Or if you have multiple cities, like have that happen. So there's not just one like straight, everyone has the same opinion of this person.
And similarly, your own character, because at one point, because of the war happening in the game, and you have the ability to flip who is in charge of one city or another, and then based on the choice, which side you side with, and based on what choices you make and how that affects a certain city, you might get treated differently now when you run it. Like there's times where you go into a city and it now has a different leader than when you first got there, and then you might go to one city, and in their basement, like there's like all the refugees from the city that you might go to, I think Solitude, and you might walk around and the people who were exiled from Riften are there and they hate you now because you've gotten them to lose their power, and that changes their vibe with you entirely.
Yeah. So I know it's a video game, and we're not a video game podcast, but there's so many great world building things you can pull from games like that that you can then use in your tabletop RPGs. Yeah. And it's
so wild that we're still this eagerly talking about Skyrim this long after they made it. Like it's like they don't.
Long ago.
I know they're eventually gonna make Elder Scrolls 6, but it feels like this is why they keep remaking Skyrim and releasing Skyrim.
Yeah, how could they?
It keeps getting people loving it.
I know. Like how could you ever, like, once you set the bar that high, like how would you ever do? It's just so good.
Yeah. I think that's why they just keep pumping out Elder Scrolls Online stuff instead of a whole new game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's also middle. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I haven't
okay.
played much of it, so
I hope that I hope that all helps you. We actually have a group that plays Elder Scrolls Online on the Discord.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
That's cool.
So I keep meaning to play, but I have to go in and I have to reactivate my account because it's been a hot minute, and I'm like, okay, I have to figure that out. But
I'm allergic to them more because I wish I liked them more. I dealt too many times with, and I know there's like things with that you can do differently, but I felt too many times with people who are just like out to ruin your day, and I don't want that.
I have the opposite problem where I become super addicted to them. And then it's like, oh, it's 4 a.m. I have to be at work soon. I have to stop playing now.
That's where I am right now with Baldur's Gate 3. I have to have my friends who also have jobs have to pull the plug. We were literally playing the other night, and I went, oh, it's literally midnight. And they were like, yes, we should be going to bed.
I spent most of my college experience online playing MMOs. I went to class because I passed and I have a degree, but like is literally like I'd sit like especially on like Saturdays, like I was like living by myself. It's like okay,
Yeah.
I'd literally log in when I woke up at like 9 and then play till like 7 the next day and then sleep and then wake up and then like I had like my little fast instant food that I'd eat while I play. It was wild.
I think that I was always afraid that would become me if I did it, so I like avoided it. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't like it because of this, and then I would just never get into it because of that.
Yeah. I have a hard and fast rule now. I have to play MMOs with people I know in real life.
That's good.
Yeah, because that's how I then like got into WoW, and since I was playing with a bunch of real people from Happy Jacks and Fair and stuff, it was like, hey, Kim, you have to work. Okay, yeah, I have to. I'll see you later.
That's what's fun about BG3 is I feel like I'm playing a tabletop game with my friends. It's just like on a virtual tabletop, basically.
Yeah,
And it's like very fun.
That's super cool.
All right, should we move on to the mailbag?
Yes, mailbag 3.
All right. Greetings to the great D Banner and the court of esteemed bodies.
Oh,
It
no.
is I, Steffi from Scotland, as I have finally been released from the ban on writing and emails. I have 2 obligations. The first, freedom! And of course, the second is to write in an email.
No.
Today-
No. We have to do this as you would as a Scots.
Okay.
Freedom!
I think I thought I was doing that.
Yeah, no, it's like.
But I also was afraid that as I was doing it, I'm like, am I violating my strike as I
Oh,
do this?
yeah, no, that makes sense. I can do it.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson is a dick, but
Yeah.
like it's a moment.
Yeah. But yeah. And of course, second is to write in an email. Today, I will share a horror story of another time I was banned. Well, is it banning if it's just blocking and ghosting? Minor details.
Oh yeah.
I was part of an online group for over a year and started over a year before I joined, so it seemed pretty solid. It was good. The plot was good. The shipping was delightful. The people were fun until they weren't. The GM embraced my out-of-the-box character ideas and made sure to bring me into the plot quickly. GM invited me to other games. I was in 3 that he ran when I woke up one morning and suddenly it was blocked and no signs of the servers. I reached out to the friends I had on the servers and most were equally confused by their banning. I did enough online stalking to check the GM was alive and nothing happened. I've been working on letting it go for over 3 years now. Longer than I've been in the group. It's not the game, as fun as they were, but the sudden blocking with no warning signs. There were issues with other players. There was an aggressive jackass who I flagged as a problem player on my first session, but he missed a lot of sessions, so didn't have to deal with his fucking bullshit. I told the GM that I wasn't leaving any games, but I wouldn't start a new one with him in it, and completely respected if he chose the other guy over me for that game. There was the passive-aggressive jackass who I called out on calling my character useless because of the luck of the dice gods. She was eventually kicked for unrelated reasons. There were issues with unintentional sexism from another player that I had an adult competition with and we're still good friends. Someday the planets will align and we shall get to play again. So over the years, I have wondered if I was the problem. The answer I came to is, of course not, I'm wonderful. While I might have been a common denominator in a lot of these things, I feel that it was because I was not for being stepped on. In all seriousness, I have no fucking idea if I was part of the problem, and I have gotten to a place where I'm past caring. There's no adult conversation, and while I can understand ghosting a problem player if they were a threat, I had trusted this GM with how vulnerable I was. I was pissed, but I'm over that now. I still miss the GM and the good people in the group. I still think about the games that I put a lot of emotional labor in, but I'm not angry or sad anymore. I'm not wasting any more time thinking about what I could have done differently. I am proud, not only of myself, but of the GM. Finally, he managed to kick out people he didn't want in his game. I can cheer on a friend for that, even if I was the one suffering. So let's not end on a downer. I'm going to be joining a new game, and I will be rehashing one of my characters from these unfinished games. There will be intentional differences, but the emotional beat of the character will be true to the original. I will never get closure, but I'm now ready for one of my favorite characters to quest for it once again. Steffi from Scotland, Steffi on the Discord.
Oh, Steffi. Yeah, that's super hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do give that advice for people like, hey, like it's nice if you want to have the adult conversation. If you don't have the emotional bandwidth, then like you shouldn't feel obligated to do that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you were on the losing end of that. It sounds like there were lots of issues in these games and like multiple not great people. So that right there makes me kind of question the GM. Like if you already have a game that has that many problems, like I don't know, that usually is also indicative of kind of like the GM being a little bit problematic.
I went through a situation similar to some of the stuff that Stephanie's describing here, where we had a GM. I played a lot of games online during lockdown, especially, and like a game that I was in that had previously had a hard time scheduling sessions. Suddenly we played a bunch. We were all stuck at home. We could play on Roll20 and it was great. And then I had so much fun in that game that I was invited into my GM's other games and it was very fun. But then we started having issues with that GM, and then we to the point where we had to have like a sit down meeting with him of like, hey, here's some stuff that you have done that is bothering a lot of us and we need to have a meeting about it. And then turned out around the same time he had another group where something happened that was unforgivable. And everybody basically who was playing with him at that point were like, we're done playing with you. We're not doing this anymore. So we didn't ghost him. Like we said to him, like, you've made us uncomfortable. We found out what you did to this person. We're not going to be part. So it was very hard. But similarly, it was also like, oh yeah, it does make sense that in multiple games that I've been in, we've had to have sit down meetings with you about behavior and things that we won't accept at the table. Yeah, it's an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
It's tough because you do get really invested in the games. You do get invested in your character. You get invested in the relationship your character has with other characters.
Yeah.
It is hard to have that suddenly stop, especially if you have no idea what could have caused it. Like, it'd be one thing if this was like, oh, I had this argument, and then the next day I was out of the games. But if you were completely blindsided by it, like this sounds like that Stephanie was here, that's rough. But at the same time, you're right. The GM, if there was something that made the GM that uncomfortable, or maybe they wanted to clear house with everybody who had caused problems or Steffi lists all these things that are like, oh, this person I had a problem with. I had a problem with this person. There was issues with the sexism. Like, Steffi might be like, yeah, I resolved it. I felt great about it. The GM might have felt like, oh, this person keeps complaining in every game that I have them in, and they think that they're like, you never know how you're being seen through somebody else's eyes. Right. And so it does make sense, unfortunately. Sometimes it just happens that way. And like, especially if you're doing online gaming and it's like a lot of text-based communication, there might be a lot of like terseness that's being read in text that's not intentional in real life. And that can be a thing. The one thing I would say I know this was just a sharing of a story, but one thing that helped me a lot when I had those two different games where characters that I cared about and stories that I cared about came to an abrupt end. Similar to this, I have brought one character back for one-shots once in a while, so I guess like jump into her for a little bit. But I kind of wrote for myself what I think her future would have been. I kind of so that was kind of my way of sunsetting that character.
Yeah.
It was like, and it made me feel like I had closure for that character. I felt like even though I didn't get to see how this campaign would have played out, I got to go, okay, I know what happens with Ashara. Like, I know she ends up whatever. Like, I wrote a whole ending for her, and like I kind of talked to some other players who had also felt it, and they were like, yeah, I think my character would have done this. And I was like, I think, there's one character, I'm like, I think your character might have become her first mate on this pirate ship. And he was like, yeah, I think that make, because they already kind of were in game anyways. I was like, yeah, I think we would have done that together and it would have been great.
That's
awesome. I think that might be useful. It sounds like Steffi's already kind of doing that by bringing this character into a different game. But if you do have any feelings of like, that's my advice in general for people, is if you have a game that you really were invested in and it kind of comes to an abrupt end for whatever reason, I highly recommend, not unlike sitting down and writing a backstory for your character prior to game, I recommend sitting down and writing down an epilogue for your character after the game. And think about it in terms of like movies where you might have had this adventure or this story in the movie, and then at the end you get the like text of what that person does after the movie's over. Just think about it in those terms. Think about it as like, okay, we had this cool little quest, and then this is how I see the rest of their life going. And, yeah.
So I'm gonna, because I think this is the best way to end this. I have a story to tell. A couple weeks, months, I don't know. I was at Big Bad Con, and I'm like walking around, and I'm passing it, and I'm putting out like Happy Jacks flyers on the tables, so like people can find us if they're into it, because like it's an indie con, so it's kind of like our scene. And I had someone who was a player in one of my games. I'm not gonna say their name. They're kind of a well-known person in like Powered by the Apocalypse specifically, and she was like, "Oh, are you involved in Happy Jacks at all?" And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of
Pretty involved, yeah.
own it and run it." And I was like, I didn't know it. I was like, also like, "Cool, you're talking to me." And then she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm on the Discord. I didn't really know it was like a show or anything." I'm like, "That's okay, it doesn't matter." And this person actually said that they were in one of Steffi's games and that it had been amazing, and that they were shocked, like joining an online community, like not knowing anybody, and they just kind of on a lark like joined a game that had been a great experience. So Steffi, you're great. You're doing great. You're amazing. You're doing us proud. We love you. And I'm sorry that you had this hard experience, but we love you and you're doing amazing. And I agree. You are amazing. So you are wonderful, and you should know that about yourself, and keep it going, love.
And in general, I don't think every player and every gaming group work together.
Yeah.
And I think that like it sounds like what you're looking for in a game, you're able to find better elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's sad to miss out on things, but I think it's really great that you have realized about yourself that like I don't want to let this thing eat me up inside anymore. Like the thing you said in your email here about, oh, I've actually been obsessing this longer than I was actually playing with this group. And I mean, who amongst us hasn't like had a relationship that ended and then you think about it longer than the relationship itself lasted? That's like a pretty universal thing, but I think it is very healthy to go,
Yeah.
you know what? I can be moving on and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Personally, Jeff in first grade, who told me he couldn't be my boyfriend because I said the Pledge of Allegiance too loud, is still something I think about. That's sad, but we all have those things.
Yeah, of course.
Like I just remember and I stopped saying the Pledge of Allegiance so loud, which I mean, like,
I mean, he did you a favor.
yeah, I mean, in the long run, but
I don't want to agree with Jeff on this one, but I think I might agree with Jeff on this one.
he knew.
I mean, he
like,
could have maybe been like, "Hey, can you try toning it down?" before he just ended things with you.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, it's just like, I mean, in the long run, he was right. I'm like, all right, but anyway, so yeah, Steffi, you're amazing. Thank you for repping us so well, and I'm super proud of everything you do. You're amazing, and I've never heard anyone that I know like not love being in a game with you. So yeah. Anyway, game days. If you want to play with Steffi, and November 4th.
My own disclaimer is that I've never played with Steffi, so none of my commentary was specifically about Steffi. It was very much about the idea and the concepts being talked about here. So
yeah, well, I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good balance. Like me with like my adoring praise, and you being like the balanced like.
I just want people to hear
reason.
like, wow, Riley really hates playing with Steffi. I've never played with Steffi. I have no idea what Steffi's games are like. I was coming from my own experience as someone who's been in games that ended, and for very good reasons. It did
not come off that way. You're good.
Okay.
All right. I think we're good. All right. Thank you for joining us for Season 32, Episode 23 of the Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Monroe Wells Soto, they, at monroero.itch.io. That's the last time I get to say that. Okay. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their amazing ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. My name is Kimmy.
My name is Riley.
And today we're going to leave you with a song called The Wellerman, sung by Stu Venable. And you can find his, I think now defunct, like folk music podcast that he ditched us for at netbusker.net. I think the last episode was out in like July or something. I don't know. But anyway, The Wellerman, and we will all see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
There once was a ship that put to sea, and the name of the ship was the Billy of Tea. The winds blew up her bow, dipped down, oh blow, my bully boys blow. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. She had not been 2 weeks from shore when down on her a right whale bore. The captain called all hands and swore he'd take that whale in tow. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Before the boat had hit the water, the whale's tail came up and caught her. All hands to the side, harpooned and fought her when she dived down low. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. No line was caught, the whale was freed. The captain's mind was not of greed, but he belonged to the Wellerman's creed. He took that ship in tow. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. For 40 days or even more, the line went slack, then tight once more. All boats were lost, there were only 4, but still that whale did go. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. As far as I've heard, the fight's still on, the line's not cut, and the whale's not gone. The Wellerman makes his regular call to encourage captain, crew, and all. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go.